Hello, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services virtual announcement event for the final delisting of the interior leased tern. We are going to give folks a few minutes here to join the webinar, and then we will begin our event shortly, so please stay tuned. I do want to note that closed captioning is available by selecting the closed caption icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen if you are using the Zoom web portal or Zoom app on your computer. Thank you. Again, welcome everyone to today's virtual announcement event. We're going to give folks just a few more minutes here to join the webinar, and then we will begin our event, so please stay tuned. Thank you. Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started with our virtual announcement event today. I would like to thank you all for joining us. We appreciate your time and participation. My name is Amanda Biederman, and I'm going to be one of your meeting facilitators today. Additionally, I have several members of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and U.S. Army Corps of Engineers with me on the webinar today. I will now briefly outline the order of today's virtual announcement event. First, staff will present on the final delisting of the interior lease tern. We will then show a short 2 to 3 minute video about the interior lease tern. Finally, we will have about 25 to 30 minutes remaining for a question and answer session, during which attendees can verbally ask questions relating to the final delisting, and staff members will respond to those questions aloud for all participants to hear. Before we move forward with our event, I'm going to go over some ground rules for the webinar today. First, your microphones and videos will be turned off for the duration of the event. You will only be unmuted if and when I unmute you during the question and answer session. Second, this event is being recorded, and a recording and transcript of the event will be provided online. Finally, as I said earlier, questions on the final delisting will be addressed during the question and answer session. We will do our best to address questions in the order they come in and to allow everyone an opportunity to voice their questions today. I will now turn it over to Regional Director Miranda to begin our virtual announcement event.
Hello there. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Amanda, so much for organizing this important event. My name is Leopoldo Miranda. I am the Regional Director for the South Atlantic, Gulf, and Mississippi Basin regions of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I would like to welcome everybody for this important event, a great day for conservation. Thank you for spending time with us and celebrate together. Now, I would like to introduce our U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Director, Aurelia Skipwith.
Thank you very much, Regional Director Miranda. Good morning to everyone, and thank you all for joining us on this very special occasion. It is a great day when the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services is able to announce a conservation success of the magnitude in which we are here today. And that is to celebrate the removal of the interior least tern from the list of threatened and endangered species under the ESA. We have a number of dignitaries and partners or their delegates that are in attendance who I would like to recognize. Major General Diane Holland of the Corps, Mississippi Valley Division. Brigadier General Christopher G. Beck of the Corps, Southwestern Division. Frances Beth Coffey, Corps, Director of Programs, Northwestern Division. Sarah Parker Pauley, Director of the Missouri Department of Conservation. Gail Bigham, Chair of the Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee. And John Pike, Lead Scientist for Duke Energy. Thanks to President Trump's and Secretary Bernhardt's commitment to engaging American citizens and partners to find solutions, we have been able to delist and downlist more species due to recovery than any other administration during its first 4 years. With the recovery of the interior least tern, we have delisted a total of 13 species and downlisted another 7. Supporting partnerships like those represented here today, streamlining burdensome regulations, and basing decisions on strong science and the rule of law has been the hallmark of the Trump administration's success and the service's ability to deliver wins for local communities and wildlife. The interior least tern is an energetic little bird, standing only 8 inches tall and weighing less than 2 ounces. Although diminutive in size, this migratory bird still manages to travel hundreds of miles between breeding and wintering grounds, traversing many rivers like the Missouri and Mississippi. The interior least tern has battled back over the course of decades since it was protected under the Endangered Species Act in 1985. And now, thanks to the work of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and its many partners, the bird now has a bright future. When the bird was first listed, biologists estimated that there were only about 2,000 individuals left in the wild. Through the hard work and determination of federal and state partners and private organizations and industry, the tern's population has rebounded to almost 19,000 birds across 18 states. New strategies used by the Corps of Engineers, along with the tern's favorite waterways, protected 80% of the bird's nesting and foraging habitats. Other federal, state, and private partners also implemented conservation agreements and management programs beneficial to the tern. The service's collaborative work with our partners and the fighting spirit of this wonderful little bird are the proof that the Endangered Species Act can serve as a powerful tool to recover imperiled species. To be successful in our conservation mission, the service must continue to engage and accommodate the needs of the people and the communities who share the landscape with wildlife. That is why Secretary Bernhardt and I are committed to working to keep working lands working, using science as the guide to our conservation efforts, and making room for recreational activities that support people and enhance our communities and their economies. Looking forward, we must continue these efforts. In closing, I would like to extend a heartfelt thanks to the many partners across the United States, the Corps, state agencies, NGOs, businesses, industries, and universities in this truly collaborative effort. You'll hear from some of these groups this morning as we celebrate a true conservation story, the delisting of the interior least tern. Thank you for joining us today. And now I turn it back over to Regional Director Miranda.
Thank you so much, Director Skipwith. This is a great day, as I mentioned earlier, for conservation and for that little energetic bird that we all love. Um, this accomplishment took many years to get to where we are today, and thanks to all the partners, and specifically the Army Corps of Engineers and all the other conservation partners across the landscape. Lot of really good and strong science is behind this decision, and a great habitat management and conservation from all of the partners involved. We are here today with an interior least tern fully recovered and delisted from the Endangered Species Act. This is a large scale landscape level accomplishment that involves monumental coordination and innovation. Many of our partners uh, use the tools available to us in different ways that we have not used before, like Section 7A1 of the Endangered Species Act was used to do proactive conservation by the Army Corps of Engineers. For that, I thank you and everybody involved. This is also a really good example how together we can connect lands and waters to conserve fish, wildlife species across the landscape. Um, Thank you to all the scientists, the managers, the staff from all the different agencies and institutions that made this a reality. In particular, I would like to acknowledge the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, Mississippi Valley Division, Southwestern Division, and the Northwestern Division. Thank you so much for your contributions to this big accomplishment. And now I would like to pass it on to Major General Diane Holland of the Mississippi Valley Division for her remarks. Thank you.
Hi, Major General Holland. I have you unmuted. You just need to turn on your video. Hi, Major General Holland. Can you hear us? I have you unmuted. There we go. I see your video. Looks like you might still be muted. I'm going to try one more time to unmute you here. We can't quite hear you still. You might need to call into the meeting as well if your computer microphone is having issues. Well, maybe while we try and get that sorted, Regional Director Miranda, if you maybe want to go over to our next speaker while Major General Holland continues to work on her microphone. So I'll turn it back over to Regional Director Miranda quickly.
Yep, we will adjust.
Thank you.
Okay. So now I would like to welcome Brigadier General Christopher Beck of the Southwestern Division for his remarks.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Regional Director and others, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here today, joining Major General Holland and Ms. Coffey on behalf of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and our partners with the Fish and Wildlife Service. For more than 14 years, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Southwestern Divisions, Tulsa and Little Rock districts have worked with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Southwestern Power Administration, state conservation agencies, local partners, and universities to identify and resolve ecosystem management issues, including endangered species conservation associated with USAID civil works projects in the Arkansas, Canadian, and Red River systems within Arkansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. It's exciting to be with you all today and know that our efforts have contributed to the comeback of the interior lease Tern. The efforts of our team, including various releases from our multi-purpose reservoirs to support the interior lease Tern's nests, island construction, and surveying the rivers for interior lease Terns. Our districts survey more than 700 miles of river 3 to 4 times per year in order to monitor the populations by counting the number of adults and fledglings. We also use dredge material from navigation channel maintenance dredging to create and enhance nesting habitat along the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River Navigation System, or MCARNS. Dredge material disposal within the MCARNS provides an opportunity for placement of material where it can support the low vegetated island conditions preferred by these birds. By combining information on the life history of the interior lease Terns with routine maintenance dredging along the MCARNS, we've been able to maintain suitable nesting habitat along the navigation system where the species had limited access for decades. The work we do with our partners supports both the population and habitat baseline of the birds. In fiscal year 2020, we saw more than 2,500 adults and more than 400 fledglings in the Tulsa District Action Area, well above our compliance goal of around 1,300 and 300 respectively. Our 5-year average is more than 300 adults and 40 fledglings over our goal. We have also seen 380 more adults along the Arkansas River in Arkansas over the last year, with an increase every year outside of the 2019 flood. This speaks to the dedication of our biologists, partners, and entire team. And this work will continue after delisting as part of our conservation plan. We're excited to be part of today's event and the larger effort to support the interior lease Tern. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate.
Thank you, Brigadier General Beck, for your remarks and your partnership. The interior lease Tern and the Fish and Wildlife Service really appreciates that. Now maybe we can try to get Major General Holland from the Mississippi Valley Division for her remarks.
Hey, good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Well, this year has certainly been a year of being flexible and adaptable, right? Well, hey, thanks, General Beck, for your comments. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in today's event. It is definitely an honor for me to represent the Mississippi Valley Division along with the Southwestern Division and the Northwestern Division on this success story. We, the Corps, truly appreciate the service's leadership in these programs, and we are very proud to be considered a partner. And as already been mentioned, can't think of a better way to start off 2021, but to recognize and celebrate the removal of the interior lease Tern from the endangered species list. I'm mindful that such a move is not easily accomplished. It takes many years, as was the case with this species, and truly a Herculean effort. And number one, and of course that's probably the main theme of today's ceremony, is that this took partnership, stewardship, and ingenuity. The Corps has been a partner in this endeavor for more than 30 years, demonstrating that through collaboration we can protect and recover an endangered species, all while continuing to provide critical navigation and flood control benefits to the nation. In 1984, the Corps began a dike notching program to help mitigate sedimentation, which results in the loss of invaluable habitat. And this led to the forging of a partnership between the Mississippi Valley Division's lower districts, Vicksburg, Memphis, and New Orleans, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Southeast Region, and the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee, consisting of 12 state natural resource management and environmental quality agencies. Constant and consistent communication between all partners was critical. There were annual meetings that consisted of updates on endangered species locations and habitats, the identification and consideration of using environmental engineering principles in the design and construction of river training structures for the benefit of the interior least tern and other species, and strengthen relationships between all parties are just some of the ways that we work together. To date, approximately 30% of dikes along the lower Mississippi River have been notched for environmental purposes, and we are really proud of that effort and that statistic. Another example of the Mississippi Valley Division's involvement with protecting and helping to bring back this species is located on the Mississippi River within the St. Louis district near the Mel Price Lock and Dam. This project is known as the Tern Barge Project. This decade-long collaborative floating habitat project involves turning barges into nesting areas for the least tern. All of these efforts supported steady progress on recovering the least tern population. And then in 2019 was one of the most successful of all nesting seasons, with 47 nests and more than 60 chicks observed. Also observed for the first time ever, a previously banded tern chick, showing the resilience of this species over time. Truly good news and a critical step in reaching this milestone. So in conclusion, once again, the Mississippi Valley Division of the Corps of Engineers is honored to play a role in this partnership to not only deliver our program of concrete and steel, but to be a partner of choice, leveraging that concrete and steel in support of the environment and conservation initiatives. Thank you for the opportunity to partner on this, and thank you for including us in your program.
Thank you so much, Major General Holland. Nice to see you again. You are a great partner. And now, I would like to welcome Beth Coffey from the Northwestern Division of the Army Corps of Engineers for her remarks. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity to join you today. Brigadier General Pete Hemlinger, the Commanding General, Northwestern Division, sends his regrets for not being able to be a part of this historic event. The Northwestern Division is responsible for operating and maintaining its 6 mainstream reservoirs and the bank stabilization and navigation project along the Missouri River, which span from Montana to its confluence near St. Louis, Missouri. Within this vast territory, interior least tern utilize habitat along a large portion of the Missouri River. Critical to their survival, they rely on emergent sandbar habitat along the Missouri River for nesting and rearing. Along the Missouri River, sandbar habitat was significantly altered and reduced in abundance in the mid-1900s, partly due to the congressionally authorized construction and operation of the Missouri River Bank Stabilization and Navigation Project in the lower Missouri River, as well as the Missouri River Main Stem Reservoir System in the upper Missouri River. While these Corps of Engineers projects provide significant benefits to the nation, over time, we've had to adjust how we manage and maintain these large projects in a manner which allows us to continue to meet their authorized purposes, yet reduces negative effects to species such as the least tern. After the least tern was listed as endangered in the mid-1980s, we consulted in accordance with the Endangered Species Act with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which resulted in a biological opinion pertaining to least terns and piping plovers in 1990. And again, after the listing of the pallid sturgeon, resulting in a biological opinion in 2000 and 2003. We began modifying operations of our reservoirs during the least tern nesting season in the mid-1980s to reduce impacts such as nest inundation to this important species while continuing to serve authorized purposes. We also began implementation of an extensive bird monitoring program in the early 1990s to document trends, incidental take, bird productivity, and provide important information to our water management operations and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Additionally, we monitor sandbar habitat acreages through acquisition and analysis of aerial imagery. Our water management staff and biologists meet weekly with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service during the bird nesting season to discuss the water forecast, projection of nest flooding, and management considerations. In addition to refining reservoir operations, we also implemented other actions such as mechanically constructing emergent sandbar habitat, controlling predators, managing vegetation, and moving nests at the risk of flooding, and signing sandbars to reduce nest disturbance. In 2013, working collaboratively with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee, Mr. Rick, who's represented today by Gail Bingham, we undertook an extensive scientific effects analysis that led to the development of the Missouri River Recovery Management Plan. This management plan consists of an environmental impact statement and biological assessment that was based on best available science and included a scientifically based science and adaptive management plan. We received a new biological opinion in 2018 with a no jeopardy determination. Information generated throughout the development of the Missouri River Recovery Management Plan and decades of monitoring on the Missouri River provided important contributions to understanding least tern population dynamics and aided the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service as part of this delisting process. I'm excited to see the outcome of all this effort and collaboration and proud of the impact our Corps of Engineers professionals have contributed to this success. Thank you.
Thank you for those remarks, Major General Holland, Brigadier General Beck, and Ms. Coffey. I'd like to honor your divisions with this token of our gratitude, a mounted interior lease tern. The decoy symbolizes your agency's work in helping bring us to the point of removing the interior lease tern from the Endangered Species Act. The inscription on the mount reads, "On behalf of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, this award is presented for exceptional contributions toward recovery of the interior lease tern, January 2021. Please accept these with our sincere gratitude for all that your agency has accomplished for this species. So our staff will be sending out these lovely awards to you after today's event. Next, we have some other partners with us here today that we'd like to recognize. Representing the Missouri Department of Conservation is Director Sarah Parker Polly. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Director Skipwith, and so many of our partners. It is an absolute delight to join you this morning from Missouri. And you can't see them, but I am joined by Mike Hubbard, who is Deputy Director for the Missouri Department of Conservation, and Jason Sumners, who is Chief of our Science Branch, as they and their staffs have been very instrumental in also getting us to this point. The Missouri Department of Conservation is absolutely delighted to be part of this event today, especially to acknowledge all of the hard work and collaborative efforts that have gotten us here. This really is already a highlight of 2021. As the director, and Director Skipwith knows this, we often get the opportunity to celebrate moments like this, but it's really the work of the team, including our own team members here at the Missouri Department of Conservation over the last few decades, that are the real heroes of this success story. In May of 1985, the Fish and Wildlife Service, of course, listed the population of the least tern that existed throughout the interior of the United States as an endangered species. Within a year of that listing, the Missouri Department of Conservation began examining various aspects of tern population dynamics along the middle and lower Mississippi River. The research implemented by the MDC team helped guide recovery planning and restoration efforts that were defined in the 1990 recovery plan. Now, initially, MDC research on terns along the Mississippi River was led by John Smith, who ultimately became deputy director of the department. Later, John collaborated with the late Dr. Rochelle Rankin, who was a wildlife research ecologist for us. Their research efforts that John and Roe, as we called her, conducted led to 6 peer-reviewed journal publications on topics such as nesting habitat needs, reproductive success, chick survival, annual adult survival rates, tern site fidelity and dispersal, and effects of river hydrology and management on reproductive success. All of these publications were critical in filling in the information gaps for assisting in managing the species towards recovery. During the past 30 years, others have conducted more research and monitoring throughout the range of interior least terns, utilizing previous lessons learned from John and Roe. Recently, these additional research and monitoring efforts, and with funding from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Corps of Engineers, a complex habitat-driven range-wide population dynamic model for the species has been developed by the American Bird Conservancy. So this early research and this model, along with long-term monitoring efforts, have helped us be where we are today with delisting the species. The Missouri Department of Conservation is very proud to have joined with the partners on this call and others to be on the ground floor of these efforts and a long-term collaborator. And while many people are responsible for the species recovery and delisting, we are especially thankful for the early efforts of John and Roe and their roles in conserving the interior least tern. If not for John and Roe, I'm not sure that we would be celebrating perhaps the great conservation success that we are today. Thank you so much for letting us join in this celebration.
I guess I was on mute. The fateful mute button. Thank you, Sarah, and it's always a pleasure to see you. We are very grateful for partners such as the Missouri Department of Conservation and realize that recovery of threatened and endangered species couldn't be done without such collaboration. And on behalf of the service, we would also like to present Missouri Department of Conservation with the mounted least tern decoy as a symbol of our gratitude for all your agency has accomplished. Next, we have Ms. Gail Bigham, Chair of Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee.
Thank you very much, Director Skipwith. The Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee is an advisory committee to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Mr. Rick was authorized by Congress in the 2007 Water Resources Development Act. It has seats for 29 Native American tribes that are located within or with historical ties to the basin, representatives of 8 basin states, and 29 representatives of diverse stakeholder interests linked to the river. These include agriculture, environment and conservation, fish and wildlife, flood control, hydro and thermal power, irrigation, local government, major tributaries, navigation, recreation, water quality, water supply, and an at-large category. USACE and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are the lead agencies, and representatives of federal agencies with responsibilities in the basin participate as non-voting members. On behalf of Mr. Rick, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the partnership that both the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Corps of Engineers have demonstrated with the states, tribes, and stakeholders in the Missouri River Basin. The professionals of both agencies consistently take the time to answer questions, listen to diverse perspectives, and work collaboratively through the adaptive management process. This partnership has only grown stronger over the years, and I look forward to continued collaboration in the years ahead. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Bigham. We are very grateful for the partnership of the Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee. And on behalf of the service, I would also like to present your group with the mounted least tern decoy as a symbol of our gratitude for all that your group has accomplished in helping to recover the interior least tern. Also with us today, representing one of our industry partners, is John Pike, lead scientist for Duke Energy. Signed in 1999, Duke Energy developed the very first and only habitat conservation plan for the interior least tern. Mr. Pike, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you and good morning, everyone. I appreciate this opportunity to say a few words on behalf of Duke Energy regarding interior least tern use in southwestern Indiana. Soon after the interior least tern was listed as a federally endangered species in May of 1985, a single pair of least terns was discovered nesting in 1986 on the splitter dike in the cooling pond at Duke Energy's Gibson Generating Station in Gibson County, Indiana. Since this initial discovery, Duke Energy has worked in close cooperation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services and the Indiana Department of Natural Resources to maintain favorable conditions for successful propagation of this species. Over the last 34 years, the population of least terns has steadily grown and expanded beyond this initial nesting area. Least terns are now also nesting at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Cane Ridge Wildlife Area next to Gibson Generating Station, as well as several other areas in the state of Indiana. This area has quickly become one of the largest nesting areas for the least tern east of the Mississippi River. To date, an estimated 1,740 least terns have been fledged with a success rate of approximately one fledgling per pair from the Gibson Station and Cane Ridge properties. To sum up, it's been an honor to work so closely with the state and federal officials to help restore the least tern population. This cooperation between all involved has been tremendous throughout the years. We thank you for this opportunity to help celebrate today's milestone event.
Thank you, Mr. Pike. And on behalf of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I would also like to present Duke Energy with the mounted least tern decoy as a symbol of our gratitude for all that Duke Energy has done to help recover the species. Fortunately for us, with partners like the ones we've heard from today, we have an incredibly long list of thank yous to hand out. Spanning 18 states and multiple service regions, the recovery of the species has been a huge partnership effort with state natural resource agencies across 18 state range of the interior least tern, like the Missouri Department of Conservation. Partnerships and working groups like the Missouri River Recovery Implementation Committee, the Missouri River Natural Resources Committee's Tern and Plover Committee, the Lower Mississippi River Conservation Committee, the Missouri River Navigation Caucus, and the Platte River Recovery Implementation Program. Industry partners like Duke Energy and the Southwestern and Western Area Power Administrations, and non-governmental organizations like the American Bird Conservancy and the Nature Conservancy. This is a lengthy list and reflects a huge commitment of all of our partners. And while we weren't able to all gather here for this event, we'll be sending out more of these mounted tern decoys in the days to come, honoring those of you who have worked with us to recover this species. Moving on, we would terribly be remiss if we did not recognize the hard work of our own employees. Paul Hartfield, fish and wildlife biologist in the Mississippi Ecological Services Field Office, has been the recovery lead for the interior least tern for several decades. His pioneering spirit showed how the use of Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act, specifically Section 7A1, could be used to achieve post-delisting management and monitoring commitments for the least tern. Indeed, the interior least tern is the first species to be delisted where Section 7A1 conservation has played a major role. Paul has embodied the mission of the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service of working with others to conserve, protect, and enhance fish, wildlife, and plants and their habitats for the continuing benefit of the American people. It is fair to say that Paul has dedicated the better part of his professional career protecting the interior least tern. And in fact, as I understand it, Paul's dedication has caused him to delay his retirement. And he wanted to be here with us today, and I am so glad that he is. Paul, it's meeting employees like you that have made my job as director of the service a true honor. The dedication of folks like yourself humble me. So thank you for all that you do and all you have done for the interior least tern. I now present you with this token of our gratitude as well. And we'll turn it over to you, Paul.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can, Paul. Thank you.
Okay, well, I wasn't expecting to speak today, to tell you the truth, but it's truly been a work of multiple people over multiple decades. So I kind of hate to take credit where credit is not necessarily due. A lot of folks have retired that have gone on that contributed so much to this recovery effort. And I really wish we could acknowledge every one of them, but we'd be here all day. Anyway, I'd like to give my thanks to everybody that supported us through this, to all the cooperation. It's been quite a feat, particularly to my comrades in pulling together the 5-year review, Rich Fisher and Casey Lott, as well as others in the scientific environment that contributed to us so much. I appreciate and I'm very honored by this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul, and congratulations on your upcoming retirement. And I'm sure those you leave behind at the Mississippi Ecological Services field office and across the service will miss you greatly. So Regional Director Miranda, I now turn things back over to you.
Thank you so much, Director Skipwith, Paul, John, Gail, Sarah. I really appreciate all the efforts from your teams in celebrating this great accomplishment. And what we heard today is that a key word is that together we can accomplish great things like the recovery of the interior least tern and its ecosystem. I would like to say thank you again for everybody joining us today. And in this big celebration, we need to do things like this. Every time that we have a conservation success, we need to acknowledge that, celebrate it, because that will bring even more conservation on the ground for all of the fish and wildlife and plant species across our nation. Thank you so much. And now I would like to ask all of you to wait a little bit longer here because we would like to share a beautiful video about this great accomplishment. Thank you so much. What a great video. Beautiful pictures. And again, great accomplishment. And with that, we conclude the um, uh, announcement, but we will open up for questions and answer for all the participants here. I'll pass it on to Amanda.
Thank you, Regional Director Miranda. I'll actually ask before we get started with our question and answer session today, if you would just like to read the list of those who will be acting as our Q&A moderators today so that all the attendees can know who will be responding to their questions today.
I'll be glad to do that. So thank you, Amanda, again, representing the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the Q&A session is Christy Young. She's the Deputy Chief of the Division of Conservation and Classification for the Southeast region. Also, we're gonna have Paul Hartfield that we met just a few minutes ago. And he's a fish and wildlife biologist from the Mississippi Ecological Services Field Office. We're gonna have Steve Ricks. He's the field supervisor of the Mississippi Ecological Services Field Office. We will also have Carrie Norquist, the deputy field supervisor of the Mississippi Field Office. Representing the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, we will have Beth Coffey, director of programs for the Northwestern Division. Andrea Murdoch McDaniel, chief of operations for the Southwestern Division. And Mary Gurnett, Public Affairs Chief for the Southwestern Division. I will turn it over back to you, Amanda, and start the Q&A session.
Great, thank you, Regional Director Miranda. Hello, everyone, again. My name is Amanda Biederman, and I'm going to be the moderator for the question and answer session today. This Q&A portion of the meeting will last approximately 25 to 30 minutes or until about 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The intent of this question and answer session is to answer any process-related questions you have for staff on the final delisting of the interior leased Tern. We will only be responding to questions submitted verbally today using the raise hand feature in Zoom. I will first go over instructions for how to ask a question using the raise hand feature if you are using the Zoom web platform or Zoom app. After we have gone through questions submitted via the Zoom web platform or Zoom app, we will then move on to participants calling in over the phone today who would like to ask a question. So please stay tuned for those instructions. At this time, if you have a question and you are using the Zoom web platform or Zoom app, please go ahead and click on the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to let staff know you would like to verbally ask a question. If you hover your mouse over the bottom of your Zoom screen, that raise hand icon should appear. And you may need to exit the full screen view in Zoom in order to see this icon. Once your hand is raised and it is your turn to ask your question, I will identify you by your Zoom name in the participants list. I will then unmute you so that you can verbally ask your question and then put you back on mute after you have asked your question. If applicable, please identify the organization or group you are representing before asking your question today. A staff member will then respond to your question aloud for all participants to hear. And we will try to answer or call on participants in the order that we see hands raised today. Please note, however, that there may be a bit of a pause between asking your question and a staff member responding to your question. So again, I have these instructions all up on the screen today. I see that we already have a few raised hands. So at this point, I'm going to unmute all of our Q&A panelists so that they can be ready to respond to your question. And then I'll go to our first raised hand on the list. So if you'll just give me a second here, I will finish unmuting everyone. Okay, there we go. We have our entire team, I believe, unmuted now. And so we'll then go to our attendee list. And I will just go based on the first hand that I see raised. And so that is Anne Millbrook. So Anne, I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute yourself. There we go, Anne. Yep, we can hear you.
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for their decades of work on the interior lease Tern. I've been following it for 10 years, reading reports and such. And you talk about 18 states, you always list Montana, but there's never anything specific about what's being done in Montana other than the Peck Dam releases water for what's being done outside of Montana. And so my question is, what has been done in Montana?
Great, thank you, Anne. I'll go ahead and put you back on mute and lower your hand, and we'll have a staff member respond to that question. So Christy, if you want to start us off. Okay, great.
Yeah, this is Paul Hartfield. There's not a whole lot of habitat in Montana. I know that the few small nesting colonies there, some of them have declined in recent years, but the state monitors those colonies, and they've been good partners at keeping up with what's going on there. Hope that answers your question. It's right on the very periphery of the range, by the way, the extreme northern part of the range. I would add, though, that the lease Tern is what's called a metapopulation. It's a large number of very small populations distributed over a wide geographical area. And while some of the smaller populations, subpopulations, may seem to be insignificant, actually small populations play a huge role in metapopulations. So Montana has a lot of wide open spaces still left, fairly good habitat. It's just on the very periphery of the range. So there hasn't been a whole lot going on there. Hope that answers your question.
Great, thank you, Paul, for that response. We'll go ahead and move on to our next raised hand, and I see that is Jordan Smith. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute you, Jordan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Jordan.
First of all, thanks for this great presentation. I really appreciate this opportunity to really celebrate this this monumental success. Just a quick question, and it's kind of a complex question. So we've received guidance for the post-delisting of the interior lease Tern. And so I guess I'm wondering, for the entities that are under a biological opinion, to what extent do they need to continue to fulfill those complete monitoring efforts? So for example, some biological opinions might include nesting enclosure areas or nest moving, things such as that. And so from the post-delisting guidance, it looks like it's just kind of basically monitoring. Are they still required under a biological opinion to continue those additional actions as well?
Great, thank you, Jordan. I'll go ahead and put you back on mute and lower your hand, and I'll let a staff member respond to your question.
Again, I can respond to that. No, by law, Jordan, they don't have to continue to do everything in the biological opinions. But this is one of the really neat things about this recovery, is we've worked with the Corps over the last couple of decades at least to come up with these programs incorporating conservation directly into their programs. That's what the director was talking about, and the regional director were talking about when they reference Section 7A1. This is the way the act was meant to be done. When they originally drafted the act, recovery was supposed to come through cooperation between federal agencies that had the potential to affect habitats. That's what we've done with this species. In this case, the cool thing about it is that, I don't know if you've heard of the concept of conservation reliant species, which theoretically will need conservation attention just simply to survive. So we can build conservation directly into the federal programs. That's what the Northwest Division has done. The Southwest Division has done under their active biological opinions. The Mississippi Valley Division did it on their own without a biological opinion. And essentially they've converted a lot of these actions into simply best management practices within their operations. So that a lot of this will go on where it's needed. Where it's not needed, it can be stopped. It's an incredibly resilient bird. That's the other thing that we've learned through this species. So some things will continue simply because they're built into the programs now. Other things will stop simply because they're not necessary for survival.
Great, thank you, Paul, for that response again. I don't see any raised hands at the time. So I'm going to, again, just read through the instructions for everyone, and then I'll also read through the phone instructions. So again, if you do have a question today that you would like to ask staff members, please go ahead and use that raise hand feature. It's a raise hand icon that is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I can then unmute you and you can verbally ask your question, and then a staff member will respond to your question aloud. Again, you may need to wave your mouse back and forth across the bottom of your Zoom screen in order to see that raise hand icon. I'll also go ahead and go through the instructions for our phone callers, because I do see that we have quite a few phone callers today. So if you are calling in through your phone and you would like to ask a question today, please press *9 on your keypad to access that raise hand feature to let staff know that you have a question. And then it will be the same process. I will unmute you. You can verbally ask your question, and then a staff member will verbally respond to your question aloud. So we'll give everyone here a few more minutes to see if they have another question they would like to ask. Great, and let's see. It looks like Jordan might have a follow-up, so I'll go to Jordan first. And then it looks like we have Brandon Walter next. So Brandon, I'll get to you after we circle back with Jordan quickly.
Thank you. Paul, this might be another question for you. So with the post-delisting monitoring, it says in there something about a range-wide decline. If there is one after the 5 years, there may be an additional 2 years of monitoring. And so I was wondering, when you had talked about the meta populations and the importance of each of those, let's just say one of these meta populations drops significantly, but the other meta populations are doing well, or at least maintaining, would that warrant a situation where we would need to look into things further? Or is it just the cumulative impact as the population as a whole?
No, a single population might not warrant it, but then again, it might. That's why we have to look at it holistically from all perspectives and all subpopulations, which is quite an accomplishment when you consider all the entities involved in monitoring, but that's what's got to be done. One of the problems that we've had is in some portions of the range, a great deal of money has been invested on monitoring and habitat management, and we see little response of the bird. There is response to monitoring and to management, but it might not be what we expect. And then when habitats reset by major cyclic weather events, we see huge responses in the birds. So if we just look at the population alone within a subpopulation, the number of birds within a subpopulation is the best way to explain it. That may or may not be significant because these birds live a long time. They live up to over 20 years. Probably a 10, 15 year lifespan is the norm. So they don't die when things are bad in one population. Generally, they move somewhere else. And that's why you have to look at the whole meta population. So you get small populations that may wink on and off. Some years they may be very important. They may have large recruitment rates because the birds have just moved in and there's a little predation. And then other years they may fail miserably in recruitment because of the predators have keyed in on them. Well, they just simply go somewhere else. That's why you have to look at it across the range. Did that answer your question, Jordan?
I put Jordan back on mute, so
Okay.
we can follow up with him later if needed. For now, we'll go ahead and move on to Brandon Walter. And then I see 2 additional hands raised. Let's see, Chantel and Allison. So we'll go to you after we get to Brandon. So right now, Brandon, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hey, hello. You all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Yeah, this is Brandon Walter. I'm the state biologist with the Natural Resources Conservation Service in South Dakota here. I do appreciate the opportunity to sit in and listen on this. This is quite an accomplishment. I guess, and maybe this is more of a local question, but I thought I'd use this platform to ask it anyway. But here in South Dakota, we have a programmatic agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service on conservation efforts that the NRCS does with private landowners. It's all voluntary. And then we have, conditions for implementing certain practices. And within the Tern's habitat zones, what is allowed and what is not. I guess my question is with the delisting of this, I would assume we still need to abide by some of these local restrictions and timeframes of when we are implementing practices, but I'd like to get your guys' input. Is that something that we're legally bound to continue to do, or is this something that we can potentially go a different route, or is that more of a localized question? Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. I'll go ahead and put you back on mute and lower your hand, and a staff member will respond to your question.
Brandon, this is Christy Young with the Fish and Wildlife Service, and if Paul doesn't have a direct answer for you, that is kind of a specific local issue, but we'll make sure that you're connected with somebody in the local area that can answer your question.
Yeah, and I'd like to jump in and say we would like you to continue management that you've been doing, if you can do it under FERC section, under your state laws. Anything you want to do is fine with us. A lot of it is up to you and will be up to you, and it'll be on a case-by-case basis. The big thing that everybody needs to recognize is when you delist a species, you don't just simply walk away. You've been doing things over the past few decades that you should probably keep doing to maintain those species, or to maintain this particular species. And we'd like you to continue to do those things that are necessary to keep the subpopulations viable within your area. If you see declines, we need to know about this. This is a part of the monitoring program. What kind of changes in management will occur and how will it affect the Tern? You may see little response by the Tern and changes in management. In other areas, you'll see great changes in response. So that's the kind of thing we have to figure out going forward.
Great. Thank you, Paul and Christy, for those responses. We'll go ahead and move on to our next raised hand, who is Chantel. So I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, I'm Chantel Hofer with the Corps of Engineers. I'm sorry if I missed this earlier, but can you tell me what is the effective date of the delisting? Are there additional steps needed to finalize this delisting?
Great.
Hi, this is Christy Young again, and the effective date will be February 12th, so a month from today.
Great. Thank you, Christy, for that response. We'll go ahead and move on to our next raised hand. Again, this is just the Q&A portion, so we are welcoming questions on the final delisting. Again, if you have a question and you're using the Zoom web platform or Zoom app, please click on the raise hand icon located at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Or if you are calling in through the phone today and you have a question, please press *9 on your keypad to access that raise hand feature. For now, we'll go ahead to our one raised hand, and that is Allison. So I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. This is Allison Gillette with the Indiana DNR. I'm the state ornithologist. I just had likely a question for Paul. So you mentioned that least terns will live for, they're long-lived species and they likely live for sometimes 20 years. But the post-delisting monitoring requirements are only for 5 years. So how is 5 years able to kind of be able to observe any sort of significant population trends for a species that is a long-lived species?
Yeah, this is, we're going to continue to meet with our state partners to try to figure out how we want to deal with this. What we've got though, Allison, is a, you know, a 40, 50-year record of steady increase of terns across the range. It seems to have plateaued right now. So, you know, if you consider that entire database, we've been monitoring this bird for multiple decades and seen nothing but increases. We have no real identifiable threats right now. I mean, obviously there's local threats to individual birds and individual colonies, but those are indeed localized, they're not range wide. So within 5 years, we should be able to detect whether or not that trend is increasing or decreasing. And as I've said, the Army Corps has built a lot of this monitoring, a lot of management directly into their programs now, which are expected to continue not for 5 years, but for 40 or 50 years possibly. So we're looking toward this on a long-term view, but we're also using the past as a window into what's going on. As you know, our funds are extremely limited for monitoring, particularly for monitoring post-delisting. So this is simply a way to get a credible monitoring plan up, building upon the huge investment that we've already made, and then of course, relying on the Corps' commitments over the long term, following that time. As well, each state has the ability to alert us after 5 years or after 10 years or after 15 years if they see significant declines. So I think we can do this. We may want to do it for longer, and we'll work with the states to determine whether or not that's the case.
This is Christy Young again, and if I could add that, you know, we did propose a draft post-delisting monitoring plan when we proposed the delisting of the species. But the comments that we did receive on the 5-year plan, you know, focused on that limited duration that you mentioned. And so we did not finalize the plan with the finalization of the delisting that is published tomorrow. But we will continue to work with the states to address the concerns that were expressed in the comments. And we do really consider the 5 years to be the minimum. And we encourage and support any monitoring, just as Paul says, above and beyond that, it is needed to meet all of the local demands and any management commitments.
Great, thank you, Christy and Paul, for those responses. I'll go ahead and check one last time. I'm not seeing any new hands. Oh, and I just saw a raised hand from Paul. So I'll go ahead and unmute Paul so he can ask his question. So I've unmuted you from my end, Paul. Let's see, you might need to unmute yourself from your end. There we go.
Sorry about that.
No.
Paul Lepisto with the Isaac Walton League of America. On that last point that was just mentioned, will that 5-year monitoring plan be finalized as part of this delisting process?
So it is, yep. Oh, Paul, go ahead.
Oh, you do it.
Okay. So no, we did not finalize the plan with this delisting, but we're going to continue to work with partners. And when we do finalize it, we'll post it online.
Great, thank you, Christy, for that response. Again, we'll wait a few more minutes here to see if anybody has any raised hands. Again, you can see the instructions on the screen or press *9 on your keypad to raise your hand if you're calling in through the phone. If we don't see any more raised hands, we'll go to our final slide and have Regional Director Miranda provide some closing remarks for us today. And it looks like Allison has a follow-up question perhaps, so I'll go ahead and unmute her.
Hey again. Just a question again about the post-delisting monitoring plan. Is it specifically legally required to do this under when a species is delisted? What is specifically the process that is required for when a species is delisted, and how to determine whether they will require any sort of intervention after delisting?
Paul, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can. The process, legally what we're required to do is to work with the states to develop a monitoring program. And that's as far as it goes. We don't have to have an actual written plan. We like to have a plan, but we don't have to have one. We try to have one. Our policy says that we will have one, but that's policy and not law. Specifically, the law states that it has to be for a minimum of 5 years. It can be longer based upon the biology of the species and the circumstances. But at least 5 years. States should have the ability to continue to monitor the species using Section 6 funds if they don't have other avenues. But again, they're not legally required to use their Section 6 funds specifically for monitoring delisted species. So that'll be up to them. Once it's delisted, the requirements for relisting are essentially the same for any candidate species. You would have to make the case, you'd have to show the threats involved to the species and go through the listing process once again. Does that answer your question, Allison? Well, I'm sorry, I forget you guys are muted.
I put her back on mute. But again, if anybody has any follow-up to any question that they asked previously, or if you have a new question you would like to ask, please go ahead and access that raise hand feature. Again, we'll give folks just a few more minutes here to see if they have any questions, and then we will pitch back to Regional Director Miranda. Okay, I don't see any additional raised hands. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and move to our last slide, and I will go ahead and unmute Regional Director Miranda to close us out here.
Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you so much, everybody that joined us today for this great conservation achievement. I would like to say that again, that we need to celebrate things like this. Every single bit of conservation that we can get on the ground is important, not only for the species, but also for the entire ecosystem that sustain these species. So by recovering the interior least tern, we're not only recovering one species, but many other species that depend on those same ecosystems that have been managed and conserved for interior least tern. So again, thank you for your time today. Great questions. And let's keep implementing really good conservation across the entire landscape by working together with all of our partners. Thank you. Appreciate it.